Hi guys, Tim Moen here. It's been a while since you've seen me. Um, I've been getting a lot of messages from people asking me my opinion of this movie called Died Suddenly. It's been out for a couple weeks now, I think. I haven't had a chance to watch it. I'm going to watch it with you for the first time. You'll get my initial gut reaction to it, and I'll give you my honest opinion of it. Now, just to lay my biases out there up front, I am a paramedic, firefighter paramedic, so I've been working through this entire pandemic. I've been on the front lines and I've seen what I've seen. I have my personal experience to draw from. I also was the leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada for the first year and a bit of the pandemic. And our stance was very clear. My stance was very clear that I was dead set against government mandates, dead set against government prohibitions. Libertarians believe that it's the individual's responsibility to manage their own risk and to decide whether they should isolate at home or continue to go to work like I did into heavy viral loads and without knowing much about what this virus was at the time. A lot of us chose to go to work. Others chose to hide at home. But the government prohibited a lot of people from taking the risks that I was allowed to take, which is allowed to go to work and assume the risks associated with going to work. So on top of that, I also started a organization when some of my unvaccinated colleagues had their jobs threatened. I started an organization called Fight For The Frontline. I put my career in jeopardy by speaking out against these vaccine mandates. Went around Alberta, raised awareness, got letter writing campaigns underway. We managed to put enough pressure on our government here in Alberta that we got healthcare workers back to work, unvaccinated healthcare workers back to work. And we changed the course of public opinion and government mandates. So I'm more likely than most normies, let's say, to be very sympathetic to what this movie has to say. And so that is laying my cards out on the table. And let's start this movie and see what it's all about. All right. Not suitable for children. All right. Ooh, nice drone shot.
Life insurance companies have reported an overwhelming and unexplainable increase in all-cause deaths among 18 to 49-year-olds. Along with that, there's also been an increase in certain medical diagnoses such as miscarriages and Bell's palsy.
Well, when I first started seeing these strange anomalies in the blood, it's just there's something different about the blood. All of these people that were dying, doesn't matter what they died of, they were having this unique, there's this unique change in the blood.
All right, so we have nice drone shot. This lone vehicle driving through the wilderness. Just from a filmmaker perspective, I'm going to make a few comments because this is some good editing here to set the frame. I used to do films, have a filmmaking company, and we did documentaries and corporate videos and that sort of thing. So we have this lone figure driving through the woods, a nice drone shot setting the scene. Setting the stage for what sounds like a whistleblower here, right? In the background, we hear radio of an increase in all-cause mortality between 18 and 45-year-olds. By the way, this was something that I predicted would happen early on in the pandemic when the government started shutting things down. I said, look, you can't shut down the economy. You can't lock people down and not expect there to be negative consequences. This is prohibiting people from doing the things that they normally would do to survive, flourish, thrive, is going to cause the opposite of surviving, flourishing, thriving. It's going to cause death. And, I think we're only starting to begin to see that with inflation and different things like that. I suspect the numbers are going to go up and the government interventions were incredibly harmful. And completely useless. So this guy, so we have that going on in the background while this guy's talking about something he's seeing in the blood of people. I'm not exactly sure what he is. Maybe he's a pathologist or an embalmer or something like that. Let's see.
I feel as though I am seeing something that could be causing their death. No one will will see what I see.
No one will see what I
So
see.
in the very
Huh.
beginning, I'm
This
thinking,
guy has is obviously expressing some frustration here because he sees a truth that no one else can see. He has the gift of sight. The scales have fallen from his eyes, and he sees something, and other people around him are just willfully blind, or they just don't have the same vision as him.
COVID could have caused this possibly, but now I'm seeing these in people that supposedly never had COVID, and then you find out they were vaccinated. And so it's like, okay, so it's the vaccine might be causing this.
Okay, he noticed something for the first time, and he also noticed that most of these people were vaccinated. So we have a correlation here. All right.
I want people to understand that we're in a fifth generation warfare.
Ooh, MK Ultra, Project Mockingbird. Oh yeah. Epstein. ISIS.
Weapons of mass destruction. But you don't believe in any?
Tinfoil hat?
Jay, what more can you tell us about the Sullivan Brothers building and its collapse?
Leaf of science.
And we're injecting them in little kids' arms.
An 18-year-old health worker has developed blood clots after
Controversial piece of Bigfoot.
Just days after getting their second COVID-19 vaccine, 2 teenage boys died in their sleep. Oh my God! A 9-year-old went to...
Wait a second. Did I see a Bigfoot and a Loch Ness monster in there? What's going on with that? Is this guy making a case that MK Ultra, Project Mockingbird, these were actual verifiable things that can see, but is he comparing those to Bigfoot? Are we supposed to believe that Bigfoot is a conspiracy, or it's something that's going on behind closed door, that there's a cover-up of Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster?
to sleep in Eagle Mountain and never woke up.
School cheerleader who died suddenly.
Who knows? Young people are dying these days.
You know, Matt and I are constantly talking about Malthusian theory.
Malthusian theory, I
Yes,
know.
I'm sure you
I-
are.
Ooh,
It
Malthusian.
says it on one of the coffee cups I was given. You know, when I was at junior college, Chabot Junior College, we finished a history course, and the professor wrote up, you need to learn this word. He wrote up the word triage, which represented, I was told, the concept that eventually the world will have too many people in it in order to subsist on its own. And that stuck with me for a long time, and that's what Inferno is about. The quantum physics of overpopulation. In an instant, there could be too many people on the planet Earth, and actually the math does add up.
just give us a 20-second definition of Malthusian theory, which
There
is
you go.
amazing.
Well, that's what I'm built for.
Okay, we have Malthusian theory entering the documentary here, this film. Malthusian theory is obviously a load of garbage. It is a pet theory of central planners who think that they ought to control, how much population there is. But by the way, it's also something that most people, most normies, seem to subscribe to. Just the idea that there's too many people on the earth, or we're getting overpopulated, and there's going to be a scarcity of resources as a result. And this is just ignorance of economics, right? It's, this idea that there's finite resources on the earth is not completely correct. Resources are not just material that's out there to be gathered. Resources are created when the human mind interacts with nature and transforms material in nature into a resource. And so, for example, oil wasn't a resource until the human mind created technology that could harness it as energy and extract it. Otherwise, it's just, black gold coming up from the ground. That's kind of a pollutant and not good for anything. So it was human ingenuity and technology that's created this. It's agricultural practices and all these things that has increased production, that has increased our resources. And there seems to be no end in sight of that. And on the flip side, we also have this natural tendency of humans to not have as many kids when infant mortality and childhood mortality drops, and when their standard of living increases. And so, we've seen the slowing of population growth, especially in first world countries where infant mortality is low and life standards are high. Where you have high infant mortality and you have poverty, you have high birth rates. And so over the past 10, 15 years, over 1 billion people have been lifted out of poverty thanks to capitalism and free markets and trade, international trade. And, that has decreased infant mortality and it's improved people's standard of living. And so birth rates have started to decline. And so there's no reason to believe that the world is just going to become overpopulated until every inch of this earth is full of a human. It's more likely that people are just going to choose to have fewer kids because of natural forces. Malthusians like Hanks and other people seem to have the idea that, well, maybe government intervention can stop this. And I think Bill Gates has talked about this in the past, where he believes that that improving child mortality is going in the third world and different things like that, and raising standard of living is going to improve it and is going to decrease population growth, right? And get population growth under control. Now, is he talking about killing off a bunch of people in third world? No, he's talking about his sin or his mistake is thinking that government can, through central planning, improve these things, right? And we know that it's markets and trade and allowing people freedom that improves these things, not central planning, which actually gets in the way of these things, as evidenced by the COVID regime itself. So my point here is, I'm no fan of Malthusian theory, but why is it being brought into this video? Okay, I have to assume that there's going to be a connection here between calling to question the motives of central planners and the vaccine and these sudden deaths. And I suspect, the red flag going off in my mind right now is that this guy's going to try to connect, Malthusian theory with why these vaccines are killing people. It's like central planners are trying to kill people with the vaccine. Now, you've got a long road ahead of you to make that case, even with me, who I've explained at the beginning of this movie is very sympathetic to the cause. But you have just lost all the normies that might have otherwise been interested to hear what you have to say, some of the good points you're likely going to make in this film. Because, look, we know a ton of people who have been vaccinated. All my coworkers, over 200 people I work with have been vaccinated. All the people I work with, that I see in the hospital and healthcare have been vaccinated. Tons of family, friends vaccinated. And I don't know anyone who has suffered any serious adverse effects. I don't even know anyone who's suffered anything other than maybe a mild sore arm or something like that. So now you're going to tell me that there's you better not be telling me that there's some kind of genocide going on from these vaccines without making a very strong case, my son, because empiricism, the evidence of my eyes of what I'm seeing around me, these people are doing fine. So, okay, let's go on.
I, Thomas Robert Malthus, have merely done you the service of stating the obvious, that the demographics of our situation equal death.
You've been proven wrong over and over again, Malthus.
Was a
British demographer of the late 1700s and was the first to popularize the idea that there's simply too many people using up too much resources.
How many cars, stereos, fancy bars?
How many people could the world support? Well, it depends. It's a sliding scale.
Malthusian ideology is often summarized in the following graph.
Very simple graphs which project what's going to happen to the planet over the next 150 years if we don't do something drastic to stop it.
It's an ideology, an eschatology.
Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary.
And it spawned a new genre of fear that lasted for generations. The fear of overpopulation.
You have to get the death rate and birth rate in balance, and there's only two ways to do it. One is to bring the birth rate down, the other is to push the death rate up.
If we do not, by humane means, limit our numbers, then numbers are going to be limited by more famines and shortages.
It's reaching plague proportion.
No intelligent, patriotic American family ought to have more than 2 children, preferably 1.
Maybe anybody who's thinking of having a third child ought to go hungry a week.
So should we have policies that penalize?
Yeah, and by the way, this thinking is so endemic that you see people nowadays, young people in their early 20s, talking about how they're not going to have any kids because climate change, catastrophe. You know, these Malthusians have people so frightened that it's destroying families, it's destroying individual happiness, because of course our greatest source of happiness as individuals comes from our family, from having children to mentor, to pass our legacy on to. And you know, these people, I'm convinced that it's a war on joy, on happiness. I see it at work every day, working for a giant healthcare, socialized healthcare system. They've just sucked the joy out of everything we do, out of the privilege and fun of being a healthcare worker, of helping people get better. And, you know, now we see, you know, in my area, up to 50% of paramedics, for example, off on stress leave. They'd rather get paid to stay home than face another day in this toxic work environment where they're treated as objects of compliance rather than as practitioners exercising their independent clinical judgment. So, yeah, it seems like there's definitely a war on, you know, they're spreading these toxic ideas. I'll say that.
People for having extra kids in the developed world?
So I do think that we should at least consider it.
And this is where people start getting nervous talking about overpopulation and population issues, because they're scared that I'm going to take away their rights to have children.
It's the belief in a coming apocalypse, and that it is you and I who are ushering it in.
We're even running out of sand, which may not seem...
Yeah, that's a fair point. You know, it's like humans are viewed as cockroaches, as parasites. And, you know, it's definitely, you know, all these climate change or climate catastrophists, let's say, view humans, any human action, anything we do that brings joy to our life or that improves our flourishing, as a blight on Mother Nature, as if we are somehow distinct and apart from nature, and everything we do is a blight on it, and that's just not true.
Can't make concrete or glass, like for windows, so you can look outside and see the world ending.
Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Right, and so what Bill Gates there has said and is saying is, you know, it's not a lie. If you improve health standards, decrease infant mortality, and you know, and especially improve standards of living, birth rates will decline because people make different choices. So,
well, common sense would tell you, if you have a man standing in front of you saying he's going to reduce the world's population by 10 or 15% using vaccines, what does that mean to you? That means somebody's going to die because you put a vaccine in there.
Oh, Jesus.
Doesn't mean
Okay. This is starting to get a bit ridiculous. That's not what Bill Gates was saying. Are you kidding me? Look, I'm no fan of Bill Gates. He's a central planner, a statist, a dirty goddamn statist. But come on, you're taking from this that because Bill Gates believes, like most people, like most economists believe, that if you raise standards of living and improve healthcare, that birth rates will decline, and therefore there will be less new births, and therefore there'll be fewer people in the world in the future because of that. If you misunderstand that as Bill Gates is going to go out there and actively kill 10 to 15% of the people with vaccines, you're a special kind of idiot. I'm sorry, bud.
I mean, you're going to save people. That's pretty much common sense in my brain. But yet I saw him say it. He said it.
Yeah, so now we know the quality of this guy's thinking. So everything he says to me, just being honest, is it's going to be viewed through the, this guy isn't very good at thinking. I'll just put it that way. So now what he has to say to me is just going to be suspect. Sorry.
And here we are. I don't know. I'm just, here we are. I'm now in
Just asking questions, bro. All right.
Before, from what I've learned here with this and seeing what I've seen, not just in the funeral home, but, what everybody else has had an opportunity to see, I don't want to take any vaccine because I don't trust the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, I just buried someone recently who died suddenly. Wasn't sick, person in their 60s, but otherwise was not sick. And I met with the family, and that was my first question: was what happened to him? Somebody mentioned.
Yeah, look, I've been a paramedic for 30 years, and my whole trade craft is predicated on sudden death, pretty much. We for 30 years, I've been picking up people who have died suddenly without explanation. Some people, it's pretty obvious they had a chronic disease. Other people, it's unclear. For example, I picked up a 30-year-old, healthy 30-year-old playing indoor soccer. The guy looked like a physical specimen, obviously physically active, and he went into cardiac arrest and died suddenly. Now, if that had happened today, you would say, oh, maybe it's COVID, or maybe it's the COVID vaccine, depending which side of the political spectrum you're on, because everything has become politicized. But this happened way before COVID, and he died suddenly. And we shrugged. Normally, I wouldn't find out the cause of death as a paramedic. It goes to the medical examiner. If it's not a suspicious cause of death, it never gets released to the public. Obviously, that's a private affair for the family, and unless they choose to release it, you're never going to find out the cause of death. In this case, however, I saw the talk screen that came back. A couple hours later, it emerged. Talked to the doc about it, and there was large amounts of cocaine in his system. So we can infer that cocaine was the cause of death. Now, nobody out there in public would know that because I'm forbidden from talking about it, about that specific patient and bringing up his name and blowing the whistle on why he died. That would be an invasion of privacy. It's not, the family isn't likely to publish that in an obituary, but the newspaper headline would be 30-year-old lawyer suddenly dies playing indoor soccer, and everyone's going to be like, well, what the hell happened? And of course, if it happened nowadays, you'd have an explanation, right? It was the vaccine. It was because he was tested positive for COVID too, something like that. So it's all, this is where our thinking has gotten us. It's driven by tribalism rather than not by rational thought, okay? By clear-headed thinking. So this guy, all of a sudden, a 60-year-old friend of his died suddenly, unexplained, right? Well, that's not uncommon. That's never been uncommon. What is more and more common now is that people are Googling the shit out of this because they want to confirm their bias that there's a huge amount of deaths going on from either COVID or COVID vaccines. And remember, at the start of this pandemic, I was critical of the COVID regime because they counted everyone who died with COVID as died from COVID, right? You remember that? Well, let's be careful not to fall into the same trap and say that everyone that dies with a vaccine died because of the vaccine. That would be equally stupid, correct? We don't want to be as dumb as they are.
To go onto Google and then type in died suddenly and find the news articles that pop up.
Right. And by the way, why do you think there's more news articles about died suddenly now? Is it because more people are dying suddenly, or because there's a demand for articles about people dying suddenly? I mean, we know this is how algorithms work. We know this is how media gets views, right? They get more clicks if they tap into a market demand. And there's a market demand right now for sudden death stories, because, you know, it's just what people, you know, want to see on one side of the political aisle. And by the way, every single person who doesn't have a chronic disease and dies suddenly, it's an unexplained death. Okay, it's going to be. And that was true before COVID. It was true before COVID vaccines, and it's true now. It's just that you're going to see a lot more articles about it now because there's a higher demand.
And lo and behold, here's a whole listing of people, of articles, of people within that last week who died suddenly. Younger people, older people, but a lot of younger people around the world.
Yeah, younger people are going to make news, right? It's especially sad when a young person dies.
Athletes.
More likely to hear about a young person than an old person dying.
Without explanation. And it's like it's no big deal. It's like we just don't know. It happens. But no, it's not happened. It's never happened like this until now.
Are you sure, buddy? I don't believe you, because I've been in this field for a long time. It's been happening for a long ass time. Now, I will say this. I will say this. Just anecdotally, it does seem like I am going to a lot more cardiac arrest calls, okay? Sudden deaths lately. Now, I don't know what the explanation for that is. Some of these people were vaxxed. Some of them were not vaxxed, okay? So I'm suspect that vaccines are causing it. And in fact, you know, at least two of them had COVID-like symptoms for a couple weeks leading up to their sudden death. So would that be a point for the COVID crowd? Is that what caused their death? Well, I'm not willing to say that either. So, you know, and some of them have been suicide. Some of them have been, you know, car accidents. All of them sudden deaths. And if you Googled sudden death in this area, you'd see all those people. And I don't buy that vaccine explains the majority of their deaths. Now, it may explain some of their deaths. Certainly, you know, I have seen at least one vaccine injury, one death from vaccines from a thrombolytic or thrombotic cascade. I think it was with the AstraZeneca vaccine. That made it to the news because it was so kind of unusual, right, to see that kind of thing happen. So, you know, but yeah, okay, we'll keep going here.
One of those important calls. See, this is both from carotid and veins. Look how thick that thing is. Very similar. It came out, apparently, I've got some of that's from a carotid artery and also some veins. So, back around November of last year, of 2021, people were asking me, well, how many people are having these strange clots? And I didn't have a very good answer for it. So, starting in November, I started making notations of whether or not the person was clotted or not, or vaccinated. My green is people that have been verified are vaccinated. Yellow typically is somebody that has smaller clots, and the orange is somebody that had more significant clots, the clots that are really kind of concerning to me. I have it dated for the quarter, numbered by the quarter. So the entire quarter, I had about 130. Yeah, only almost 14% had no significant clotting. A lot of the substances that I'm seeing are stuff that looks pretty much, it's this white fibrous stuff. Now, instead of calling them blood clots, I try to refer to them as white fibrous clots or white fibrous structures. How come all of a sudden these things are happening in so many people?
All right, so we're seeing a bunch of clots there. Post-mortem clotting is common. Is he just noticing this now? Like he never noticed blood clots before? It's a pretty common thing, unless maybe you're on blood thinners or something, which might explain why maybe 18% of the people he embalmed didn't have them. But what's more likely, that these these are special clots, or that he just hadn't really paid attention to a post-mortem clots before? I mean, why would he? He's just hooking up 2 needles into a cadaver or to a dead body, and filling them full of embalming fluid and draining them of whatever blood. So he's not going to be sucking clots out necessarily, right? So, again, we've seen the quality of thinking he has. I'm wondering now if he's just in a major confirmation bias rabbit hole.
When I first started seeing these strange clots, in the beginning I thought, this is kind of weird, it's kind of crazy, I don't understand. As I started gathering more and more photographs, I'm able to share it amongst other people that I work with. I talk to other embalmers that have 30, 40, even 50 years of experience.
I'm a licensed funeral director, National Board.
Okay, those clots that he just showed there, they look like post-mortem, just normal post-mortem clotting to me. I've been on autopsies, and I've, worked with a pathologist, and, he showed me the post-mortem clots that occur and how they're different from pre-mortem clots, like a clot or a thrombosis that you would have in a blood vessel, which is very friable, very tough, very adhered to the vessel walls, doesn't come out. Like you can't just pull it out of the vessel very easily because it's attached and it's very tough. These things look like they slid out of the blood vessels and that they're just regular kind of post-mortem clots. But hopefully they've done an analysis or something and can compare them to regular post-mortem clots.
Funeral director and certified embalmer. I've been in the death care industry since 1982. I've been in the embalming process with well over 1,000 bodies. And I had actually...
Okay, so we're hearing from embalmers, and from what I know about embalming, it's a relatively short course. They're learning how to preserve a corpse for a funeral and put in embalming fluid, that sort of thing. What I would love to hear from is a pathologist who's examining these things, someone who's trained in pathophysiology, in A&P, and can actually give us an educated analysis of these things. Being an embalmer does not give you any kind of insight into clotting cascades, and that sort of thing. So, again, get me someone a little bit more credible on here.
Notice some of the differentials in the clots as well in some of the bodies I had been embalming, and that had started recently.
First time I saw it firsthand, pulled out of a deceased, my end, was about 3 months ago. Been struggling to embalm people for around about 18 months. My embalmer was complaining that he was having trouble getting fluid through people. And the way they do that is they cut into the carotid artery and they pump it around the body via a pump. He was struggling to get it through, and we kind of thought, well, maybe the pump wanted servicing, and had a look at it, it doesn't. Pulled this out, and he kind of grabbed the end with the tweezers, and this comes out in one piece, one elastic piece. It looks like calamari,
longest one that I have on video.
Again, the fact that it came out in one piece, that they could just pull it out, tells me it wasn't adhered to the vessel wall and was likely not a pre-mortem clot. In other words, that it's a clot that developed after death, not before death. So, that's where my mind's at right now when I hear this. Now, that's not to say that there isn't something happening. Maybe people are more likely to clot who get the vaccine, but here's the thing. I remember reading articles about how COVID caused all these microemboli in the lungs. And I remember reading an article from one embalmer who talked about these crazy giant pancake shaped blood clots he would find post-mortem in COVID patients who had been in the ICU, and how they were unusual. Again, I take that with a grain of salt, but it could be something. Maybe COVID causes them. We know that COVID causes blood clots. It follows that the reason COVID causes blood clots might also be the reason why vaccines cause blood clots, right? That the spike protein has some kind of interaction. And we know in certain circumstances with certain people, that certainly happens, that there's a thrombotic cascade that occurs, and that also occurs in people with COVID, and it seems to occur far more often in people with COVID than the vaccine, from what I've seen, but it is highly possible that the vaccine is causing, it certainly is causing some blood clots. Whether it's a widespread genocide and a depopulation agenda, that hopefully we'll find out more.
It was probably almost 3 foot long, which is incredible to come out of the jugular up here. It's incredible. That is not normal.
I talked to other
I think it is normal.
40, even 50 years of experience. Said, hey, have you guys ever seen this stuff before? And the answer was always,
I haven't seen clots like these. These long, white, fibrous, different, not blood clots, but they're clotting the blood, so therefore you have to call it a clot.
I have been in this profession actually for approximately 12 years and approximately 200 to 250 bodies per year, and I have never seen anything like this until the vaccination.
Now, I've been an embalmer for 41 years. 41 years I've been embalming, and I've never seen clots like these.
Here's a guy messaged me the other day. He even sent me a picture.
And that fellow embalmer?
This is not mine. This is his. Same stuff. You see that?
We know something's going on. I deal with a lot of funeral directors and embalmers. I attend national conventions, state conventions. I'm very involved, and we know something different is going on.
Okay, again, we're seeing a bunch of stuff from embalmers. Show me something from a pathologist. I mean, surely pathologists are also catching these. These are people who do autopsies and determine cause of death. And if there was something unusual going on, certainly we'd be hearing from pathologists about all the crazy stuff they're seeing that's different than normal. Maybe we'll see some in the film. I hope so. I hope that there's something other than these kind of flimsy anecdotes. But
we don't know exactly what's going on, but the timing of it is just hand in hand. We're connecting dots here. And it certainly appears that there's some relationship to the vaccine and these obstructions that we're seeing.
I was in Ohio last week or the week before last, and there were 100 embalmers at the Ohio Embalmers Association in my lecture, and I posed these photos up where people could see them, and nearly all of the embalmers out of 100 in this room raised their hands that they had seen clots and white fibrin structures of that kind of size. And when I ask again, when did they start seeing them? Again, it's that 16 to 18 month period.
This is different. And they need to figure out what it is. That's the problem, is they need to figure out. That's why we're talking to you, is that we're concerned for humanity.
Once I knew what was happening, I'm a man of principle. You know, your family's just as important as mine. Why if I...
All right. If the majority of the people that are vaccinated are having these clots, all right, and the vaccine is causing these clots, you would see the majority of people that you know that are vaccinated having serious issues, but we're not. So why am I not seeing deep vein thrombosis? Why am I not seeing people I know who are vaccinated have chest pain and cardiac issues or strokes or all the things that come with having your blood vessels blocked and clotted off? So I don't understand how all these people, how they can make the claim, which I assume they're making, that the vaccines are causing all these clots, and we're not seeing massive issues with the majority of people that get vaccinated. Yet I know several hundred people that have been vaccinated who have had, and I've never heard anyone having any of these issues, except one patient I had, like I said, that had a thrombotic cascade.
And if I don't speak out, we're all anyway.
As a Canadian embalmer, I have found that everybody I embalmed for over a year had fibrous mass clots. The fiber mass clots had been fed by blood clots at the ends that were integrated into the fiber mass clots. The fiber mass clots themselves were not blood clots. On average, I would embalm a body every day or two. Every single body had them, and they were massive.
When I was talking to Dr. Ken Thorpe, he was more concerned about the little tiny clots that he called microclots. And when I asked him about microclots, I was like, let me explain. Sometimes when I'm seeing the blood,
Yeah, this was the big fear with COVID as well, right? All the microclots that it was causing. That
almost like it has little fine grains of sand, or almost like fine grains of coffee grounds. The reason why he's more concerned about those is because they will go undetected, and they can get lodged up in capillaries and end up slowly starving organs of the oxygen that it needs. So what I did is I captured some blood that looked dirty. It's clouding it up, but see, I wanted you to see the specks that are floating around. There we go. Looks like rust. It does. Look at like, see, you can almost see that they're like stringy looking.
almost like it has iron in it, eh? Like blood has iron in it.
The first time I seen something that what I would describe as a different type of blood than I had ever seen, consistency of blood, was on a younger lady that was in a car accident. And I noticed onto the table as we were getting a little bit of drainage from her that her blood looked as if it was, the only way to describe it is blood on beach sand. It was sticking to the table.
I began noticing strange things with the blood, looking like it had coffee grinds or sand in it, to complete separation, like a clear orangish fluid, and then clots coming later, like the blood had almost separated.
All right, so again, we're seeing some, there's, at least three possible explanations for this, right? One, something is happening in blood that wasn't happening before, and that's because of the vaccine, right? So, maybe the vaccine is causing blood clots post-mortem that is unusual, that we haven't seen before. Another possibility is that these people are just starting to pay attention to blood in a way that they hadn't before, because they've gone down some rabbit holes on the internet and done their research, and they're convinced there's a problem with the vaccine. They mistrust pharmaceutical companies, and rightfully so. And so now they're looking for all evidence and anything that could point their finger back at a problem with vaccines. Whereas in the past, they weren't looking for that evidence. They weren't looking. So they didn't notice the granules in the blood. They didn't notice that sand-like quality. They didn't notice all these blood clots. So it could be post-mortem problems caused by the vaccine, or it could be that people are just noticing for the first time things that they hadn't noticed before that previously did exist.
And of course, then there are the fibrin structures that we get, and it doesn't matter if it's a young or old person.
I'd like you to kind of feel.
Kind of looks like calamari, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can kind of hold on.
It's like a rubber band almost.
Yeah, like a rubber band or like calamari.
So of course that explains people stroking out.
And that was my concern in the very beginning of all this. The whole thing was, as I'm seeing all of these strange clots, I'm hearing stories of blood clots and embolisms and sudden heart attacks.
Scientists say there has been an increased rise, a sharp rise, in unexplained deaths during the pandemic, deaths that are not listed as COVID-related.
Yeah, and again, this is something that a lot of us predicted would happen when you shut down the economy. And, you not only shut down the economy, but you basically force people onto their couch and into a sedentary lifestyle. There's going to be some ill health effects, right?
I would just like to find answers, because so many people, young people, are just dropping dead. There were 2 in the local paper today out of Lafayette, Indiana, and I question, how did they die?
Autopsies are not...
Right. What if there isn't a single explanation? What if everyone died for a different reason? What if someone died from a fentanyl overdose? What if someone died from R-on-T, from getting a puck to the heart right at the wrong point in a heart's beat? I've seen that before. What if someone had a previously undiagnosed congenital issue? What if someone sat sedentary for a year and a half and loaded up on potato chips and then went out for engaged in vigorous cardiovascular exercise? I think any of those things might contribute, possibly, right? Could also be the vaccine. But I think that looking for one cause here is probably not best way to look at it. You want to look at each individual case.
As often and as frequent as it had been done in the past. There's no way that that type of obstruction would not cause stroke, heart failure, some type of pulmonary embolism.
Yeah, he's right. He's right. If you had those kind of blood clots in you, there's no way you wouldn't get a stroke, a heart attack, something like that, right? And so if you're seeing it in the majority of your patients, and then you have to wonder, okay, is suddenly everyone who dies dying because of the vaccine, or is it maybe that fact that these clots are forming after death and not before death? And if this is a widespread problem with the vaccine, why aren't we seeing more of it? Why am I not seeing a bunch of it? Why am I not seeing a bunch of my friends and coworkers die from all these giant clots in their body? Well, it's likely because they don't have those clots in their body right now. Maybe they'll develop them after they die.
Now, most of the people are not autopsied. Therefore, no one will see what I see.
And that's why what we see back there, people need to know. Nobody will know.
Okay. People are autopsied if it's an unexplained death, all right? If it's not immediately explainable. So if it's a young person that dies, they get an autopsy. At least in Canada, they do. And so it goes to a pathologist's office. They cut the person apart, look for blood clots, thromboemboli. They look for, damaged organs. They look for, they do a tox screen. They do all sorts of things to try to determine the cause of death. And then you will never know what that cause of death is because, like I said, that's a private matter between the family. And so unless there was, something causing death that the public needed to be aware of, and then a pathologist would certainly tell. So if a lot of these people aren't getting autopsied, my question is it because it was pretty obvious to the physicians attending what caused the death? And, so.
Unless we tell them what we're seeing, because it happens, and then you have a visitation and a burial, and it's over.
I feel as though I am seeing something that could be causing their death. And the dead can't speak for themselves, so therefore, the only way to bring this forward is like, I have to speak for them. Since the vaccine, this rubbery stuff, this stuff here is absolutely, hold on, I don't know who this is. Hello? Yes. Okay. I'll be there as soon as I can. I'll be there as soon as I can. I'll give you a call shortly. All right. Bye. Okay. Well, it looks like I got to go to work. So maybe you guys can come with me and we can talk along the way. I've been trying to warm people up to the idea of doing it. So maybe we just go ahead and try to go up there, and I'll give them a call as we're on our way and see what they say.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, and I've been invited here today to testify to the truth before the legislators of Idaho. The information I'm presenting is made as a protected communication under Title 10 USC 1034 as a whistleblower. My opinions are my own and do not reflect that of the United States Army, the DoD, or any entity thereof.
Insurance companies figured that if there was something catastrophic that happened to the United States, they would see a 10% increase in all-cause morbidity and mortality. 10%. Just like an unprecedented, catastrophic, natural event or something that happened in the United States.
U.S. life insurance companies have reported an overwhelming and unexplainable increase in all-cause deaths among 18 to 49-year-olds.
40% is no one's even calculated that. I mean, that's never been factored into what things would look like. It's apocalyptic.
Wait a sec. We need to know what the stats are here, okay? I remember there was an article that came out explaining how Sweden's mortality rate from COVID was 25% higher than neighboring countries, Norway and Denmark. What did that mean? It mean that instead of something like 0.3 out of 100,000 people, or 3 out of 100, or no, what it was instead of 4 out of 100,000 people dying, 5 out of 100,000 people died of COVID in Sweden. So like, what's that? 10, 20 more people died in Sweden than in Denmark or Norway. But yet the headline said 25% increase. Well, that doesn't mean that 25% of people die of COVID. So 40% increase in mortality rates, when the rate numbers are already low for that age group, isn't necessarily a cause for concern. It might be, and it could also be a reporting anomaly where a lot of deaths were going unreported for a long period of time, and then we saw this with COVID stats, for example. they'd play catch up, right? So all of a sudden there'd be a huge dump of data, and we saw an increase in that. So I'd want to get a little bit more clarity behind that number, but I'm just not seeing it out there. Not seeing, other than opiate overdoses in young people, which have certainly gone up. I'm not seeing a widespread death of young people. So when she says this is apocalyptic or majorly concerning, skeptical. Seems like they're lying with numbers there.
In my 15 years as a doctor taking care of soldiers, I have never seen this litany of debilitating and potentially deadly medical conditions in soldiers. These conditions included strokes, transient ischemic attacks, pericarditis, myocarditis, erratic heart rates, arrhythmias, rapid onset and progression of various cancers to include testicular cancer, esophageal cancer, brain tumors, neuroendocrine tumors, spinal tumors, thyroid dysfunction, multiple sclerosis, cognitive impairment, persistent severe insomnia, suppression of the immune system, unprovoked blood clots in the splenic and portal vein, avascular necrosis, liver dysfunction, menstrual irregularities, and miscarriages.
Well, I think if you look at the 5.3.6 post-marketing analysis report, the 1,291 adverse events, I don't think those came as diagnostic tests. I think they came as confirmatory tests. You ordered a product, you wanted the product to kill people. Hey, stockholders, we got exactly what you ordered.
Fourth shot, Borla, the CEO of Pfizer. Good for CVS, good for Walmart, good for your health.
When I reached out to Army Public Health Command,
It's doing a pretty shitty job of killing people. If I was an investor in depopulation and genocide, and what I got was this vaccine, which doesn't seem to be killing a whole lot of people, I'd be pissed. Again, I'm struggling to.
Safety concerns, I was ignored. Threats against my career were made, but no appropriate actions were taken to fully investigate the number and scope of adverse medical events after COVID vaccines.
What I was here today to speak about truly was the weaponization of public health.
Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also a whistleblower. That's my. That person right there called me one day. I called her, I can't remember, it was an email. And she said, have you seen the DMED system? Have you seen what it's up? I'm like, I'm working on the border. I'm trying to stop 12,000 people from coming across this border a week. And she said, well, take a look at it.
Seeing the DMED data, I have significant concerns that we won't have a standing army in 5 years.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
01, United States Air Force, A-10 instructor pilot, mid-30-year-old male, hospitalized 12 hours after vaccination. Diagnosed with pericarditis and anaphylaxis, removed from flight status for 6 months, thus negatively impacting unit mission readiness. I have never felt so abandoned by the military.
Oh, that's common. The military does abandon vets.
My death. I was mocked, discredited, unsupported. Our squadron morale was ripped to shreds.
Yeah.
All these things were completely unnecessary. We are truly less ready on multiple levels.
Yes, I will say that people who chose not to get the vaccine for whatever reason, whether it was medical reason, religious reason, or whatever, they were demonized, and it was an absolute horrific sin on behalf of government, on behalf of society, on behalf of civility, that these people were treated this way. And people who did suffer adverse effects from the vaccine, again, they were gaslit and told, no, it couldn't have possibly been the vaccine that caused this. And yeah, so absolute sin. But what that lady said there, that she's worried that there's not going to be a standing army in 5 years, I find that absolutely fucking ridiculous. I'm sorry.
Talked to a wife of a soldier that had a stroke, which required speech rehab for several months, and talked to her while he was in the ICU, and say to her, he's going to be okay, and he'll be able to serve again, because this is what he loved to do.
Back in September 2021, I submitted an affidavit in the Robert E. Austin case in which I outlined how the DoD was violating its own risk management process in their push to mandate the vaccine of every member of the armed forces with an experimental vaccine. After my testimony was made public, the DoD made no effort to investigate my safety concerns.
I got contacted by Attorney Tom Renz over the weekend, who represents some whistleblowers within the Department of Defense.
I have declarations from all three. The state is under penalty. This is under penalty of perjury. We intend to submit this to the courts. We have substantial data showing that we saw, for example, miscarriages increased by 300% over the 5-year average, almost. We saw almost 300% increase in cancer over the 5-year average. Cancer is not being talked about except for by Dr. Ryan Cole. Thank you, doctor.
I was the first pathologist in the world to say, guys, we're seeing an uptick in cancers. That's toxic spike protein has so many mechanisms that allow cancers to wake up, and certain cancer genes that it binds to and promotes mechanisms. Everywhere I go, radiologists, interventional radiologists, oncologists, cancer surgeons like I met today, cancer, 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 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds, reactivated or second shot, third shot, month later, breast cancer, stage 4 everywhere.
We saw, this one's amazing, neurological. So neurological issues which would affect our pilots, over 1,000% increase. 1,000.
10 times. That's 10 times the rate, and obviously that
83,000, 82,000 per year to 863,000 in 1 year. Our soldiers are being experimented on, injured, and sometimes possibly killed.
Senator Johnson looked in the camera and said,
the Department of Defense, the Biden administration is on notice. They must preserve these records, and this must be investigated.
And within 24 hours, that system that is run by the Defense Health Agency was shut down.
This is the bottom line up front. This is the weaponization of our healthcare system. These are done in acts by legislators. These all started a long time ago. Some could say in biblical times with good and evil.
If we think that they're not nefarious actors in the world, people that work for principalities and dark places, if we think that, we're fooling ourselves, right? Because that's where we're at.
1974, Henry Kissinger put out a paper that said we need to decrease the world population. And that's when the globalists kicked in.
We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff.
Our book, Limits to Growth, was the first concrete effort using a computer to look at trends that unfold over decades, even a century. We were trying to understand long-term physical demands on the planet. And in the 70s, we were thinking that probably in the period 2010 to 2030.
All right, so we're back to the Malthusians here. I guess that the gist here is that all these nefarious actors who want the world depopulated are using the vaccine as a method of doing that, which seems suspect to me since everyone I know that's got the vaccine is alive and well.
Resources drop more steeply, and food and production follows suit. Population continues to expand for perhaps one more generation, then collapses calamitously as deprivation takes hold.
Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down.
The World Economic Forum, you have Klaus Schwab and George Soros and Bill Gates. They talk about depopulation. They talk about all of these kind of utopic ideas that they have.
The United Nations Sustainable Development
Sure.
Goals.
Yeah, and by the way, these guys, again, they think that socialism will increase, or some sort of green fascism will improve life and living standards, and that's why population will go down. Well, of course, it's going to decrease population, but not because it's increasing standards, because it's decreasing standards. So I suspect, a lot of people will die because of this. In fact, we might even see a population explosion because, as we know, as infant mortality goes up, people have more kids. As flourishing goes down, people have more kids. So, WEF, this might backfire on you.
15 targets we must meet by 2030 to ensure decent lives for all on a healthy planet. Right now, it's expected we will fail. One reason for that is the growth in our global population.
We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this crisis.
COVID-19 also helped legitimize instruments of control.
It's a deep,
Yeah, sure has.
and structural restructuring of our world.
Therefore, we
Yeah.
have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity.
There's always those people that see themselves as the smartest in the room. And if they just had control over everything and everyone's lives, they could make things so much better, be a utopia. I see these people in the workplace. I see them in all aspects of society, just ego-driven, elite mentality people that are ambitious, power-hungry, and believe that control is best kept in their hands, and then things will get much better. And that's what we're seeing here.
Opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
Also be clear, the future is not just happening. The future is built by us.
Those people definitely have had tremendous influence and sway in this whole thing. And that is why they seemingly know how to hold these events and almost perfectly predict what's going to happen.
The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on public health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks.
An outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur.
I know we would all agree that if we had a vaccine in hand for CAPS, it'd be a game changer.
A majority of Americans expect a vaccine to be available within 2 months, and 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental.
Vaccinate, vaccinate, make an appointment. Vaccinate, vaccinate, make an appointment. I got the vaccine up inside my body. Got that vaccine up inside my life.
Will we get our dose? Just please hurry.
I got nothing.
And come on, vaccine.
Trust in your healthcare. Shot, 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 shot. Staying alive, staying alive. Time for us to trust and not debate the vaccine belief.
Oh yeah, this is super cringy, right? Super cringy. By the way, that Event 201, I don't make too much out of that. In emergency services, we run simulations all the time about possible scenarios that could occur so that we are prepared to engage in them. And so, you could say, look, we're doing a large complex or a large apartment fire scenario here. This is how we're going to do things. And then you can juxtapose that against a large apartment fire the next year and say, look, the fire department planned this. This was all in the works. It was prophetic that there was going to be a large. No, it's just we're doing our job. We're like looking at risks out there and trying to figure out how we're going to mitigate them and how we're going to be best prepared for them. That's what a big part of training for emergency preparedness is, right? More cringe. Ugh.
Because you are in a war, because this is a fifth generation warfare for your hearts and your minds, it's done mostly by digits, right, through the computer and those kind of things. But it's also done with adjunct weaponry. And this adjunct
We have the ominous music again.
They don't want you to know that your body is now their property and playground.
Huh?
And they will do with you what they feel like doing to you. And they
Well,
will destroy
I guess that's
your
true.
life.
I mean, we are taxed, right? That doesn't tell you you're owned. I don't know what will.
And it is. It's the new bullet. It's the new missile. It's the new form of warfare. You don't need to fire a bullet and win a war. I wanted people to understand that we're in a fifth generation warfare. Fifth generation is for the heart and the mind.
The United States government has been engaged in psychological operations on its own citizens for over 60 years. MK Ultra and Operation Mockingbird are just two of the declassified programs designed to manipulate the minds of Americans and the world. The majority of these operations occur in
It's been occurring since a lot longer than that. I mean, propaganda, government marketing itself as a good entity, that's been going on since it was formed. In the old days, it used to be the priestly class that legitimized the king or the monarch, or now it's the priestly class of public intellectuals, universities that are legitimizing government through so-called social contract. Syncopal episodes.
We got a call regarding you.
Okay, wait a sec. Why did they show those syncopal episodes? People passing out. It's funny. What brought to mind is whenever we have like an honor guard, in our fire department, we have these honor guard things where we're doing memorials, and these guys have to stand at attention, and almost inevitably every event someone passes out. It's been going on for years, by the way. I don't think it's the vaccine, but are we supposed to believe that the vaccine caused these people to pass out? How did it do that? Did it put a blood clot in their brain, in which case they're dead now? That would be evidence of a blood clot. If not, then how is the vaccine related to those syncopal episodes?
Multiple times, and it seems like they don't want to talk to you.
Well, now it seems that way because she called the police on me.
You should always be suspicious if the people in charge of safety don't want to see the safety data. That should be a red flag. I couldn't understand why people aren't looking at this data. Even the clinical trial for the Pfizer vaccine showed that the vaccine killed more people than the placebo group. It's supposed to be the other way around.
So, what's your name?
My name is Steve Kirsch.
Steve Kirsch?
Yes.
Okay. Where do you work?
I'm a journalist for Substack.
Substack?
Yeah. I have about close to 1 million followers on Substack.
So I've been called an anti-vaxxer, I've been called a misinformation spreader. MIT has labeled me a misinformation super spreader. And in fact, if you go Google, you type in misinformation super spreader, I'm the top hit in the entire world. Why am I labeled a misinformation super spreader? I have no history at all of being a conspiracy theorist. How do I go from being, hey, you should get vaccinated, waving the flag, I love Tony Fauci, to saying, oh, wow, we've been lied to. How did that happen? I was vaccinated in March of 2021. My wife was vaccinated, and all my kids were vaccinated. So you couldn't call me an anti-vaxxer. I've always gotten all these vaccines that the government has recommended. I've always trusted the government. And then I started hearing stories from my friends. So one person said that she asked me if the vaccines were safe, and I said, of course they're safe. And I said, why are you asking me this question? I mean, like, have you not turned on the news? Like, where have you been? She said, well, 3 of my relatives were vaccinated and they died a week later, and they were all perfectly healthy before they got the vaccine. And I said, well, that's impossible. That must be wrong. And then she replied, yeah, but they're dead.
Is it really safe?
Yeah. So again, we have an anecdote, right? We have kind of third-hand information. Someone told this guy, and that may be the truth. But again, if you're trying to convince normies that these vaccines are very dangerous and they're causing widespread death, when they're looking around them at all the people they know that are vaccinated and not seeing any of that, you got all your work cut out for you. So good luck.
These vaccines are safe. They are incredibly effective. Vaccines are safe and effective.
Getting a booster different from
Not so effective for most people, it turns out, hey?
And effective.
But if there's one message that needs to cut through all this. The vaccines are safe. I promise you, they are safe and effective.
Researchers have
Not so
confirmed
effective.
that the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine is safe and effective.
This is what you don't see. This.
Surprisingly, most people don't want to know what's in the vaccines. In fact, nobody wants to know what's in the vaccines because nobody in Congress is asking to analyze the vials. Nobody in the mainstream media has ever asked what's in the vials. And the public doesn't want to know either because the public's not asking what's in these vaccines. If people understood what was in the vaccine, they'd go apeshit.
The first one is a typical package insert that we see with any vaccine. When you open the box, next to the vial, you find a package insert that has information about what the product contains. And this is a typical vaccine insert from a vaccine that helps protect against meningitis. It's a more traditional childhood vaccine. And the other label that I'm going to show you, the other package insert, came from a box of mRNA product. So vaccine that was brought to the clinic for the purpose of giving that to children. And this should look the same as the other package insert that I showed you. But yet when we open it almost 2 years into this, we find that it still says intentionally blank.
And I mean, they're allowed to, under
It's pretty crazy.
authorization, put anything in them they want. And the FDA isn't inspecting any of these facilities. The European Medicine Agency allowed the purity to go from 100% requirement down to 50%. And then all of a sudden in the middle of the shot rollouts, you hear, oh, okay, we don't have to worry about this cold chain. So now you've got degrading products, which probably benefited some people.
All right, so here's a board certified pathologist. I'd be interested to hear what he has to say about shots.
And dodged the bullet. But the ones who got the proper dose at the proper temperature are probably the ones that got harmed the most. I mean, how much do they care? They're making billions.
Yeah, mRNA was the technology that we had less experience, only 2 years working on this. And actually, mRNA was the technology that never delivered a single product until that day. Not vaccine, not any other medicine. So it was very counterintuitive, and I was surprised when they suggested to me that this is the way to go.
You know, Steve Kirst, by the way, has a great offer out there for your listeners. I don't know if you know about this.
No.
His offer is anybody from any major academic medical center or any government agency who will come to the table and have a fair discussion on vaccine safety and efficacy. He'll pay him $2 million.
Anybody? I offered $1 million, not to win the debate, just to come to the table, $1 million. And when they refused the $1 million, I said, okay, name your price. Is $5 million, 10 million, 100 million? What will it take for us to have a civil discussion on the record? On recorded.
Okay, so here, this stuff is a little bit more compelling to me, right? So the fact that no one will debate him, you know, it is true that the authorities, employers, corporations, CEOs, everyone that's kind of been responsible for advancing this agenda has not looked very closely at the efficacy and ingredients and all that sort of stuff in these vaccines. Certainly, the vaccines were not as effective as they were advertised. Certainly, they weren't as safe as they were advertised. I'd like to get the actual numbers. I'd like to see something other than some kooky embalmers with anecdotes. Get down to brass tacks here and answer some hard questions and do some comparative analysis and see, okay, how safe are these things? We know they're not that effective, but are they, you know, how safe are they? Now, what are the long-term effects? Different things like that. We're not likely to know that for a long time. But again, you know, when we're talking, this would be far more interesting if you hadn't made the case that there's already, or at least strongly implied, that there's a depopulation agenda going on and that everyone coming in with these vaccines post-mortem is getting these blood clots. Now you've already lost me, all right? Let's just have a clear, level-headed discussion. What do the numbers show? What is going on? Like how bad are these vaccines? They're definitely not as bad as the embalmers are making them out to be, but how bad are they really?
Where we can go through the evidence in the VAERS system and other pieces of data so that we can have an open discussion about this. So the VAERS is a voluntary reporting system. And it was created this way because the drug companies negotiated with the government to say, the government said, we will give you liability protection for your vaccines. But the quid pro quo is that we're going to establish this vaccine adverse event reporting system, which of course they could have done anyway. We have a VAERS system in the United States. The system in Israel was even worse. In March, these researchers came to the Israeli Ministry of Health and said, hey, we got a problem here. Basically, they're told that the vaccines are killing and hurting people, and you're withholding that information from the Israeli people.
Yeah.
So the latest is
certainly if you are a public health authority let's assume the best intentions here, all right, for a second, and play a mind scenario here. Okay, let's assume you're a public health figure who believes government has a strong role to play in a public health emergency like a pandemic, and you believe sincerely that vaccination is the best way to counteract this. Now, you also know, okay, there's going to be a few people that have adverse effects, as with any vaccine. There's going to be a few deaths from this. What are you likely to do if you're a public health official? Are you going to encourage that? Are you going to release statistics about the adverse events of the vaccine or the adverse effects of the vaccine? No, you're going to keep those hidden because you want people to believe this thing is completely safe and effective. You want as much uptake as possible. We know that this is what public health officials were thinking. They said over and over again that a lot of the lockdowns and prohibitions on the unvaccinated were to force them to get vaccinated. It was all about compliance. It was about getting as many needles in arms as possible. And so looking at it through that lens of, for the greater good, we're going to crack a few eggs here. Well, you crack a few eggs to save the many, right? And that's all that's required for this to go down is people who have quote unquote good intentions and a belief that in strong government intervention and the greater good and the public good or something like that. If you have those three things, you would do all those things. Of course, I don't believe in any of that shit, so I wouldn't do any of that. But most people, you have to admit, it doesn't take some special, uniquely evil individual to believe all this stuff.
Israeli vaccination studies are out, and Steve Kirsch says the results prove that the government was lying all along about the frequency of adverse events from COVID shots.
I sent an email to over 200, close to 300 people at the CDC asking if any of them wanted to see the data.
Okay.
Almost 300 people. Not a single person wanted to see the data at the CDC. Stu, I have the personal cell phone for...
Wait a second. Isn't this guy, Stu Peters, the guy that did a video about or made the case that COVID was snake venom or something like that and being spread through the water? Yikes. Okay.
Grace Lee, who is the chair of the ACIP committee, which is the outside committee of the CDC. I asked if she wanted to see the data. She ignored me.
Did they explicitly tell you no, or did they just ignore you?
No, they just ignore me.
Have you been in the talks before?
I have, yeah.
And for the same reason?
Yeah, to let her, to contact her. Because she's not reachable. She's not reachable in her office. She doesn't answer her cell phone. Her assistant doesn't answer her email. That committee is responsible for approving and being the outside independent source for approving these vaccines.
How did ACIP recently come to the decision to recommend COVID-19 shots for this latest group of young kids? And what kinds of things were you looking for in the data?
We got a call regarding you coming over here multiple times, and it seems like they don't want to talk to you.
Well, now it seems that way because she called the police on me.
You know, I think we need to recognize that COVID-19 is here to stay, that vaccines make for a safer and more reliable way to develop immunity against infection.
But now it's very clear that she's actively avoiding the question of whether she wants to see the Israeli data that shows the vaccines are not safe. That's pretty serious.
Okay, well, it seems like she's not interested, so...
How in the world could anyone, especially the top person in the world responsible for safety, not want to see the safety data that shows that the vaccines are not safe?
Okay, again, you're losing the normies here, right? Because they see this woman who's a public health authority trying to do her job, and this guy who's got some fringe beliefs from a normie perspective, harassing her, hounding her, calling her, and when she doesn't pick up the phone, goes to her place over and over again. You know, I've got a wife. If there was a dude doing that to her, you know, it wouldn't be the cops who would be sent. It would be my fucking fists in his face. That's how a normie's going to view this. Yeah, she's a public health authority. She should have to answer these questions. She should look at them. You know, maybe she knows something about the Israeli data. Maybe it's discredited or in her eyes, or who knows what her rationale is. Or maybe she just doesn't want to talk to some guy who's she doesn't know, who is, you know, made it his mission to discredit what she does for a living.
Don't want to be confronted with even the question, do you want to see the data? They want to have plausible deniability.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market?
Did we know about stopping immunization before it entered the market? No.
Pfizer vaccine not only stops people from getting sick, but also stops them from spreading the virus to other people.
Now we know that's a lie, don't we?
Transmission from just a single dose.
They're stopping people also from transmitting the disease.
Again, here we have a bunch of lies from public health authorities. Why not focus on those things? Why not you know, point out, you know, why conflate all this stuff with like a depopulation agenda and everyone who gets the vaccine is on the verge of death?
The chances are very likely that you'll not be able to transmit it to other people.
Yes, it will protect you, but honestly, it's not for you. It's so you don't kill other people. It's so you don't spread it to other people. 114 million Americans, nearly half the adult population in this country, has had a vaccine shot already. 114 million of us have had it. The number of people who have died from getting the shot is 0.
There are about 14,000 Americans who have reported deaths. Now, that's probably underreported by a factor of 100. So you take the 14,000 deaths that are reported in the VAERS system, multiply it by 100, you get 1.4 million. But the deaths that happened 5 months later...
That's a pretty big speculation. Pretty big leap in logic there.
...are not going to get reported in the VAERS system.
This guy looks like he's stroking out.
An elderly woman has died in what's
Or having a seizure. No, maybe it's a seizure.
Case of fatal blood clotting caused by the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine.
Investigation is underway tonight over whether a local man suffered blood clots as a result of getting the Pfizer vaccine.
All right, so we're seeing a series of what I call syncopal episodes. Some of these look like just straight up epileptic seizures, like that one.
Two teachers who were
And I guess we're supposed to believe these are from the vaccine.
Passed away suddenly this school year.
Where's the evidence of that? I mean, this kind of stuff happened every day before the vaccine. Syncopal episode. Guy collapsed.
Therapeutic Goods Administration is calling for calm.
These are the kind of things I've seen all the time in my 30-year career as a paramedic, so none of this stuff impresses me. These are people having seizures and other people passing out.
Woodgrove High School student athlete Colette Bain passed away unexpectedly after a medical emergency.
A 20-year-old nursing student died of cardiac arrest 1 day after getting the mandatory.
The 16-year-old had a cardiac arrhythmia.
Oh, Jesus.
Conclusions over the death of a woman from blood clots after receiving the
The
COVID
Queensland man is in
vaccine.
intensive care tonight, suffering a blood clot after receiving his AstraZeneca vaccine. Over whether a local man suffered blood clots as a
Due
result
to a blockage in an artery.
with medical experts confirming the death of a Central Coast woman is likely linked to the jab.
I said, we're just going to have to get used to this. And he says, the shots. And I said, yeah, we're just going to have to get used to this. This is the way it is. If people keep doing this, then this is going to keep happening.
The vaccine can kill you two different ways. It can kill you in the short term. Now, there's a longer term effect, and this takes 5 months to kill you. And this is when your veins are basically clogged up with this protein material, this amyloid protein material that's not blood clots. Now, the timing of when the embalmers first started seeing these blood clots, mid-2021.
So many miles on my
All right, so when are the people that got the vaccine going to start dying here?
half of my time is
For some of us,
driving
it's
from
been
one
over
town
2
to
years.
another. The busiest I ever was, to be honest, was January of 2021. Now, I didn't even think about it being related to the vaccine at all at the time. Looking back, I say, no wonder they died of a heart attack or a stroke or some kind of a pulmonary embolism, because you can't live with this stuff in you.
Probably do about 160.
I can't live with it in me. I'm living with it in me right now. When am I going to die? When are all my coworkers going to die?
We'd also had a post-mortem.
You're losing me, kid.
Then the family had asked me to embalm, so there are 3 planets that needed to align. And this poor guy of 30, it was full of it. It was hanging out of him like spaghetti. This one here came out of the aorta from the heart. They take the shape of the vessels that they're growing in totally, and they gradually fill the vessels as they grow.
That's what post-mortem blood clots do.
That's what's killed him.
Hey, I just want to let you know I'm pulling into the funeral home here, and I've got some guys that are with me. Are you fine with me bringing them in?
All right. I'm guessing we're going to get to see some post-mortem blood clots here.
This is the iliac artery. And this clot coming out of the iliac. Normally we don't see clots in the iliac, in an artery. Usually they're in veins. And I'm probably not going to be able to get it all.
Yeah, that's a giant post-mortem blood clot. What do you mean it's not normal? It's what happens when blood goes stagnant, when it doesn't circulate, when a person dies.
The big one came out of the vein. The small one came out of the iliac artery itself.
Wow.
As the months passed by, the clots became worse, and each person, the quantity of them was much larger, and they were getting larger. We were doing an injection and drainage into the common carotid artery, and we were getting fluid in, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. We could not get any more fluid. We were not getting any drainage of any type.
Look at it. Whoa, watch out. It's going to spurt. That's a monster. Holy Jesus. Come on.
I believe the only way that a medical doctor could see this in the body is if they actually went internally into the body.
So this is coming out of a beating heart, all right? Look at this, tell me if it looks the same way.
So what they were pulling out there looked like an embolus rather than a thrombosis. An embolus is a clot that occurs in the body and causes a heart attack. It lodges in the coronary arteries, and then it builds up there. Sometimes we can get those with clot buster drugs. Sometimes, they'll get it with percutaneous route by threading a catheter up through the groin, up into the coronary arteries. Sometimes they'll do a balloon angioplasty, spread a thrombosis out. But again, that was a recently formed clot there, an embolus. Now, what caused it? Who knows? A lot of times, embolic myocardial infarctions are nothing new. And so, whether that was caused by COVID vaccine, by COVID, or just by unhealthy lifestyle, inflammation in the body, whatever normally causes heart attacks. Who knows?
Imaging scan, but before we do that, I want to learn a little bit more about your medical history. Tell me, when this all started, these symptoms that you had.
Early August of this year, my legs started swelling. I was getting a lot of pain from the crotch area all the way down to the ankle.
Sounds like a deep vein thrombosis. Yeah.
Wow. So I was transported to the hospital, and they confirmed that, and also that I had a clot in my lungs.
So you went into.
By the way, this also occurs in people that sit a lot. And what have we been doing during the pandemic? We've been sitting a lot.
Yes, I got put on Eliquis when I was being released.
It's a blood thinner.
Come to find out, the Eliquis did not work for me.
Okay. And did they let you know that that is extremely rare?
Every doctor I saw said it was extremely rare.
Which side did you get the shot in? Which arm?
I think it was both. Do you think it could have been the left for both of them? Because you got two, right?
Yeah, it could have been the left.
Because the left arm definitely looked it had much higher thermal signal than the right. Yeah, so we can see the left side of his face has a much stronger thermal image, and then the white is also extremely hot.
So it's hotter.
And this is in the area of the pre- and post-auricular lymphadenopathy chain, and then the tonsillar is also very well lit up.
So increased heat could be a sign of inflammation.
The left side was the one where he has confirmed clots. The right side here is showing significant issues with the vascular system.
So I would recommend referring for an ultrasound of the lower extremities bilaterally to rule out any kind of new clotting or venous obstructions.
Hello.
Hi, Michelle. This is Nick and Matthew. How are you?
I'm good. So before the vaccines came out, there were 1 to 2 fetal demises every 2 or 3 months. You would see one. I got this email the other day. It said that there was a record number of fetal demises and that there were 22 of them in 1 month. And in this email, it said that it's projected to increase each month.
The fetal demise in mothers, gestational mothers, in that 22 to 26 week period. I had a run of that in my funeral home, and 5 of the 6 were vaccinated. The other had remdesivir, and they all lost their infants.
We're just seeing a fridge full.
By the way, I saw a stillbirth, spontaneous abortion, miscarriage, whatever you want to call it, of a mom who was an avid anti-vaxxer. She got COVID and then had a stillborn. So is it possible that COVID caused the miscarriage? Possibly. You know, there's theories that the spike protein interferes with the attachment or whatever of the, I think, the placenta and the ovum, stuff like that. And if that's true, if the spike proteins cause an issue with COVID, then it's plausible as well that it could be spike proteins from the vaccine, right? It's not a very well studied vaccine compared to other ones. So who knows? It could be that these stillbirths were related to the vaccine or COVID or something else.
Poor babies, but we're not actually doing the funeral. So that's a mystery to me as to where these babies are going.
So are you saying there's more fetuses in the refrigerators now than there was prior to 2021?
Yeah, I'm saying there's more fetuses now in the refrigerator than I've seen ever before.
I've been doing high-risk obstetrics for 43 years. I see a vast number of patients a year. I don't know of any other maternal fetal medicine physician in this country that sees as many patients as I do by ultrasound. At one point in time this year, I was on track to see 9,000 high-risk OB ultrasounds. So I know what's going on, and I've seen death and destruction like I've never seen before.
The stillbirth rate is measured in terms of live births per thousand. And really it's come down in my career from about 10 to about almost 5.8 or 6. Now let's go to 2021 and look at the stillbirth rate for Michelle's. This is horrifying. But if you take this death figure and you look at that rate at 29.3, that sigma that you're looking at is 40 plus sigma, standard deviation. Let that sink in. This is from Waterloo, Canada. 83 stillbirths, about 4,000 deliveries. That exact same thing you saw with Michelle's. If that weren't bad enough, look at this. I couldn't even put it. There were 13 dead fetuses in one 24-hour period. One 24-hour period.
1,200-fold increases in menstrual abnormalities. And then when we get into pregnancy, we're looking at a substantial increase in miscarriages, in birth defects, a substantial risk of fetal cardiac arrhythmia, fetal cardiac malformations, significant fetal growth slowing, significant reduction in amniotic fluid, fetal cardiac.
So again, what we're hearing here is some troubling stats when it comes to reproduction, right? But again, the stats are like 40 and 1,000. So in other words, most normies are going to know a bunch of people who gave birth over the last year to healthy babies, and they're not likely to know too many people who, out of those people they know that are pregnant, who had stillbirths. It's still a relatively low number, but it is troubling that. But I guess my point here is that if they're trying to commit genocide by wiping out fetuses or something like that, they're doing a piss poor job. It's still the vast majority of pregnancies are healthy pregnancies that give, even in vaccinated people. So, again, this video is like scattershot. We saw Bigfoot, we saw Loch Ness Monster, MK Ultra. We saw a depopulation agenda. We see the vaccines are killing people. The majority of people are going to die from blood clots. To now, it's not blood clots. It's reproductive health, which is a different thing now. So we don't have, it's a scattershot approach, looking for any evidence at all that these vaccines are committing genocide or something like that, or attached to a depopulation agenda. And the truth here is that there's some real troubling issues with the vaccine. I worry that, so we know they're not as safe as advertised. We know they're certainly not as effective as advertised. And those facts ought to call into question handing over the reins of power to government. But to now add in some kind of conspiracy or some kind of covert plan to depopulate the earth through a vaccine, that is watering down and calling, it discredits all the valid information in here.
Are you saying babies are having heart attacks in the womb?
Yes. The vaccine causes a significant inflammatory effect.
3 different safety monitoring systems. Again, they found no significant safety signals for the mother or for the fetus, because we have to remember in obstetrics we're dealing with 2 patients.
So no increased risks to be vaccinated while pregnant.
Anything that causes inflammation in my business, in my area of expertise, causes damage, injury, death, and destruction in pregnancy. We've known that for half a century.
On March 1st, the FDA released the first round of thousands of pages of data submitted by Pfizer for review of their COVID-19 vaccine.
It's the 5.3.6 post-marketing analysis of the adverse events, in which they outlined that 83% of all pregnant women who got vaccinated ended up with a dead baby. They had 270 pregnancies. They could not account for what happened to 238 of those pregnancies. In the remaining pregnancies resulted in a dead baby. And they only had one normal outcome.
And originally the documents were going to take 55 years to be released, but because of a court order, we'll get all of the documents by year's end.
Thank you for the floor, Mr. President. Honorable National Assembly, in January this year, something happened that has not happened for decades. The birth rate fell by 20% compared to the same period last year. Choba Getot, researcher at the KRTK Institute of Economics, points out that this drastic decline came just 9 months after the COVID mass vaccinations began in Hungary.
Now, I will say, a friend of mine, she just told me this the other day, her mother had volunteered at the hospital prior to COVID. So they called her and said, hey, would you come back in and volunteer? And she volunteered obstetrics, right, babies. So she said, yeah, all right. So they retrained her, and then they called her back and said, I guess there's no point in you coming in. We're not having any babies born.
I never pass up an opportunity when I see a newborn baby. I stop and I drink it in. Because my heart aches to think that seeing a newborn baby may become one of the rarest things. And I want to be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But so many people have taken this.
By the way, that Australia figure is vastly overblown. I actually looked into the Australian because I remember that story from the past, and it turns out that they stopped reporting births, or there was some issue with reporting during COVID. In other words, we're likely to see that the birth rate didn't decline nearly as precipitously as that would have you believe. So again, it calls into question the integrity of the filmmaker when these obvious things that are easily kind of debunked are trotted out as facts confirming his case, or like, impactful, you can't ignore this kind of thing. Now, there could be a number of reasons for declining birth rate. I can imagine a lot of people, when their lives are shut down and locked down, might be hesitant to bring a child into this world, knowing that they're under this tyrannical regime and they might not be able to make ends meet, and we got inflation and everything else going on. It's one possibility. Another possibility is, okay, maybe they're trying and the vaccine is just causing a lot of miscarriages. Another possibility is they're trying and COVID's causing a lot of miscarriages, or there could be some other explanation. We don't know.
And you have just evil that is destroying that. And my heart hurts for God. Like, you could give people all of this. And they would use their time, energy, and talents to try and destroy it.
What the last 2 years has taught me that there is a pure evil in this world. A pure evil that has no respect for any of us. Where I can tell you, we are regarded in much the same way as livestock.
We were trained that
Well, he's right about that. I mean, certainly the very idea of government itself treats people like livestock. It says, here's a group of people that have the right to rob you, to imprison you, to prohibit what you can put into your body, what you can sell to others, what you can consume, every aspect of your life. Yet most people seem to support that. So does that mean most people are evil in the world? Maybe it does. Or maybe it just means that people are infected with a mind virus and just unclear thinking, poor thinking about morality, ethics, and how systems can themselves create evil outcomes, right? For example, if you have good intentions, pure heart, want the best, and you believe government is a good way to get those good intentions done, and you believe in the greater good, would you say that person's evil? Maybe. You're stretching the definition quite a bit. I would say they're just ill-informed. And this is actually the danger of all this kind of looking for the puppet master behind the scenes, kind of covert, evil, nefarious puppet master thing, is that it ignores the banality of evil. The fact that most horrendous evils done in this world are done by and have been done by people who think they are conducting the greater good and think they're acting with the highest moral virtue. They don't see themselves as evil. And they have bad ideas about government, about the use of force, and that sort of thing. So none of that stuff. So that's my worry, is that while you're looking for these puppet masters, you're ignoring your neighbor who's voting for public health care, who's voting for universal health care. Is your neighbor evil for supporting that? From my perspective, universal health care is an absolutely abhorrent, evil idea. Yet I don't see my neighbor as evil just because he supports it. And so anyways.
One thing that prevented adversaries from deploying bioweapons was that in order for them to have a strategic impact, our enemy would have to have a delivery mechanism that would allow them to expose a large enough population of people in a short enough period of time before the people knew they were being attacked. Dispersion in the air would be cumbersome and ineffective given UV light dispersion, wind patterns, and that there are generally not significantly large enough numbers of people outside concentrated in a small area. Likewise, attempting to put them in water would have limited effectiveness because of dilution.
All right, so this lady has an insight into the Dr. Evil that's pulling the strings here. He's got all these different plans. He's trying to depopulate the world. He can't use chemtrails. He can't use this and that and the next thing. He figured it out. Vaccination is the way to get his nefarious things done. He's doing a piss poor job of genociding us with vaccines.
This is a bioweapon and that this was a bioweapon.
It's a shitty bioweapon.
Humanity.
This is the same lady who said that the standing army of the U.S. won't be there in 5 years.
And control the population of the world.
I mean, how can this thinking be taken seriously?
This has been well planned. This is Agenda 2030. This is the Great Reset. This is what it's all about, you know. So one of the hardest things, knowing what I know, was accepting that people are going to die because they're just not going to believe it.
We have to be the plan.
Dude, you told people that COVID was snake venom. This guy strikes me as a grifter of the highest order, but that's just my gut feeling. I don't know much about him.
God-given role. And so if you are quiet or apathetic or complacent, you have to stand before God, and you have to answer for that.
He answers to God. He
a
speaks
warning
for
to all the
God.
People that are in the military right now, officers who are responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen with their troops. If you don't stand in the gap, you're complicit in this crime.
The only way we're going to save our lives is by together, clubbing together to do it. That's our strength. And this is probably the most biblical world event that anyone could ever imagine. It's World War III. It's a spiritual war of good against evil. And I just hope that there's enough.
Here's the sad thing. Lockdowns, central bank money printing, prohibitions, a giant centralized state is definitely causing and will cause untold death. But yet we're focused on vaccines. These vaccines are the thing that's causing the deaths. I don't know.
Get vaccinated. It's incredibly effective, but the truth is not enough people are getting it. We've got to change that.
Yeah, the majority of people have gotten vaccinated. And here's another thing: if you have a depopulation agenda, would you kill off the most compliant, regime supporters there are, or would you kill off the most anti-authoritarian, disobedient rabble-rousers, like the ones that didn't get vaccinated? Well, I know what I'd choose. I would want the most compliant, obedient people to survive, and the the unvaccinated to die. So what if the real depopulation agenda is to instill complete mistrust in one sect of the population in government, and then, by releasing an ineffective vaccine that isn't all that safe, and allowing them to say, yeah, see, we can't take anything that pharmaceutical companies put out, and then maybe they wipe you guys out with the next pandemic that is actually deadly, and they give all the compliant people vaccines, and they let the anti-vaxxers die. That's also just as plausible as what we're seeing in this film, which is to say, it's wild speculation, unsupported. All that's going to be left is Klaus Schwab and anti-vaxxers. Hey? This is creepy. Yeah, let's not forget what they've done. They've imposed lockdowns. They've increased the regime. They've decimated our healthcare system. They've printed up more money than our grandchildren's will ever be able to pay off. They've made us all debt slaves. They're killing us off, but I just don't buy that they're killing us directly with the vaccine.
The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them.
If you refuse to be vaccinated, you shouldn't get the same rights as people who've been vaccinated.
You know what?
To walk among us unvaccinated
Yeah. That stuff is absolutely abhorrent. You know,
Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy.
yeah, these people are horrific. These people are horrific. That line of thinking I've seen over and over again. The politicization of pandemics and vaccinations has turned us against each other, and that is a real sin. But, you know, the good news is a lot of normies are turning around on this. You know, I know a lot of my coworkers who were, you know, often thought the same thing as these celebrities, and they have turned the corner. They realize, okay, yeah, these vaccines weren't all they were sold to be. They're not stopping the spread. They're not as effective, and they don't want to get vaccinated every 3 to 6 months, and so they're turning the corner on this issue, I believe. But this video isn't going to help them turn the corner. If anything, it's going to push them on over to the left. Don't push me left, bro. Do not push me left. Do not push me into these progressive crowds by spewing all sorts of crazy nonsense and anecdotes and wild theories and scattershot, disjointed ideas. You know, just stick to the basic facts. Just stick to the basic facts. These vaccines weren't as safe and effective, and public authorities lied to us. They refused to debate or address these lies. And, you know, a lot of people are going to die because of the economic sanctions that were imposed on us and continue to be imposed on us. We're just starting to feel the effects of it. So anyways, that was my initial impression. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sure I didn't make a lot of friends in the comments. A lot of people seem to love this video. I didn't. I thought it was a hot pile of garbage, but it made a few good points in there. All right, there you go.